I had three things I wanted to share with you guys. First is I learned some of the most important values in my life from playing rugby. I played soccer, hockey, rugby. I was a three-sport athlete in high school and in Cégep and in university, and rugby ended up being my favorite because the values that I was instilled, that I was taught, rugby coaches I had were phenomenal human beings. I'll give you some idea. I went to BCS, as you know, and the house director in one of the houses was Robert Common, and he was a rugby guy. He would stop kids from walking across the rugby field because it was sacred ground to him. He would say, no, you can't walk across that field. You have to walk around. To all the kids in the school, he would race out in his slippers in the winter time and stop kids from cutting across the field. This is the kind of guy he was, just to give you some sense. He had, I don't know if you've ever seen rugby posts. They're some of the tallest posts in the world, right? They are super high up in the air, and that's because rugby kicks tend to be really high, and you have to be able to gauge whether or not it went between the posts, right? So he had us every year, get this is special, had us every year go and cut down trees in the forest, take the limbs off, paint them white, and put up the posts ourselves so that it was our field. Who does that with students, right? That's the kind of coaches that I had, that you're like, oh my gosh, like how much dedication. And I learned through the years of coaching rugby that you start realizing how much it really means to people, because it is, lots of people who don't know the sport will say, you play that psycho crazy game? Really? Because it looks like there's no rules and everybody's just hitting each other all the time. It looks psychotic to most people who've never played, but once you start playing, there's this expression that people use it's a game for hooligans played by gentlemen and gentlewomen. So a game for hooligans, so it looks barbaric, but it's played by the nicest people in the world. And so my first point was to say, I've learned some really cool values in rugby. And it takes me to my second point, which is, I usually teach this during the season, is the game is, when you start hitting and tackling and doing scrums, and man, you can get a real sense of you are bruised, you are bumped, you're bloody lipped, bloody nose, your fingers look cracked, like it takes its toll on you physically, on your body. It's kind of a brutal game that way, so you can compensate for it by being the nicest people in the world. And by this, I mean to each other all the time, and to the other teams, after you hit them and you help them up. And when somebody hits you, you go, oh man, that was a great hit! And eventually that message spreads, and all the rugby coaches I know are spreading that message in the sport. You are nice to each other, you are super nice to the refs, because what by default is our culture with referees? Yeah. It's awful. For some reason we think that's okay. When did that happen? Yeah. They are people like me, dads, teachers, normal people. Since when did it become okay to yell at them and make them feel terrible? So your coaches that are doing it, they're bad role models. The good role models are the rugby coaches. Zip it. Don't say bad things about the ref, ever, right? Even if you had a bad ref, what should you do? You talk to your coach, and your coach will say, don't worry, I got it. I'll go and talk to the ref afterwards and have a discreet conversation. There's no need to yell obscenities at a referee. Think about that. Nobody does that in society. It's just wrong. So that's the kind of values that I learned in rugby, that I wasn't learning in soccer or in hockey. I was learning those kind of like humanitarian type of values where I was kind of like, yeah man, that's cool. It's awesome. We're like smashing each other's faces on the field. And then after, we're super nice to each other. We're super kind to each other, even the other team. I became best friends with kids at Selwyn House and LCC, teams that we played when I was in high school at BCS. I became best friends with some of those kids afterwards. In Cégep, we went to Cégep together. I went to Cégep in Montreal. And I was there with people that I recognized from the other teams. We're like high-fiving, hanging out, going to the bars afterwards. We became best friends. And this is part of the culture, believe it or not. In England, just to give you some idea, I was on tour. We would go, play the game, it was brutal. We got kicked, like our butts kicked, 50-60-0. Afterwards, you have a beer, on some of the campuses. You're allowed in high school. It was crazy to us. You have a beer with the other players in the room, and then you go and shower, you get dressed in your school uniform, and you go and have a cucumber sandwich with the headmaster. And to me it was like, okay, when a cucumber sandwich after we just had beer, after we just pounded each other on the field, like it's like bringing civilization to the uncivilized sort of craziness of the sport, if you understand it. And that's a beautiful thing to me. I loved that. That really kind of appealed to my values in sport. Is I am an intense individual, for sure. I compete fiercely in everything that I do, but I'm the nicest person after. I'm nice to the people I used to hit on the rugby field. And we would talk afterwards, and that's the culture of rugby that I love. Absolutely adore that culture. And the third point was when you're on the rugby field, you're constantly encouraging each other, constantly making each other feel good. The beauty of a rugby team, and this is the last thing I want to say, is there is a job for everyone. Look around the room right now. I made you guys introduce each other with the person you knew the least on the team. Look around the room. You haven't had a chance really to play with these people in soccer or in basketball or in hockey, but this game brought you all together. And there's a job for every single one of you. Whether you're tall, whether you're short, whether you're fast, whether you're slow, and I'm telling you, you don't know this because we didn't have a season so that you could see what jobs can be done. But in the scrum, there's a position in the middle there for a kind of smaller person who's good with their feet. So you can picture a Lana or a Val, right? There are jobs for tall people in the line-out where they're reaching up for the ball or lifting up another person to catch the ball. There are jobs for all types of people. It's beautiful. I love the game for that. So everybody feels like they belong. What sport does that? I can't think of one. Rugby is the only real sport that unifies all of these different skills and body types and all of that stuff and can put you on the field and everybody feels good about the position they're playing and everybody feels good about being on the team. You don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be the tallest. All of that stuff is amazing. Those are some of the values that I just loved in the game. That's why it's the one out of the sports that I have played, the one that stuck out for me and why I still absolutely love coaching it. And I always wanted to pass on those values that I learned from my coaches. And so this is my opportunity every year with every team that I coach in rugby is to share that with you guys, to let you guys know that, like, to me, here are some of the core humanitarian values that I learned from rugby. It goes beyond the sport. Cool. So, yes, I wish I could give you guys pins right now. We talked about the pins a little bit. I know it. Mr. Van Dyke knows.
You're killing me.
Mr. Van Dyke knows, exactly. Like, he feels as strongly about the things that I just said as I do, for sure. So just so that you understand, being a member of the team is the single most important thing. So, I'll give the photos out in a minute. Let me just get through the awards. I want to get through them quick. And it's funny that I was listening to you guys introducing each other and speaking about each other, and I thought, wow, it's insane how good a team knows each other. How well you know each other on the team, because I'm betting that you, as I tell you who the award winners are, you won't be surprised. You'll be like, yeah, that's exactly what we would have done too. That's my guess. Because listening to you guys talk, you kind of were saying those things about the people that I'm giving awards to. So there's 3 junior S's and 1 sportsmanship award on the team. And I'll start with the sportsmanship award, and I think you guys know this, is I remember watching her catch the ball, and instead of running around the outside, she just decided, I'm going forward. And you need some power runners like that in rugby. You create that kind of what I call a wake, like behind a boat, of people trying to tackle you, and it puts them all offside, and it lets your team gain some valuable ground, and sometimes you might just punch through and score. People might just bounce off of you like bugs off a windshield. I think people would do that with Sean. Sean has the sportsmanship award. She's demonstrated a really strong work ethic and just taken a lot of responsibility and a lot of leadership on the team in a kind of quiet and in your own way. And I think people like to appreciate that. And I heard person who was speaking about you mentioning that, saying that you picked up the game like that and understood it, right? It was you, Alfie. Sorry, I forgot who it was exactly.
Yeah.
Nice, and so you kind of nailed it, right? You knew, and I was sitting there nodding to myself going, that's so interesting that she picked up on that, you know? You said something like she's one of the better players or something, right? It was good. And the 3 junior S's, I'm just going to award them at the same time, so you can all come up at the same time, is I think no surprise that there's 3 girls on this team that basically would have scored at will. If you've seen it in practice, if you've seen us, you've got to believe it. That if you're going to go for it, you're going to tuck that ball in and you're going to go and then, oh, you're not, and you're going to pass. They got to commit their defense. They have to tackle you, and if you don't get tackled, you score, and if they do tackle you, then you're passing. That's amazing. That's how you play rugby, is every one of you has to look like a legit threat to score. Because if you just look like you're going to get the ball and you're scared out of your mind and you're just going to pass it, they're not going to bother with you. And then it's 2-on-1. But for them, the defense is double coverage. They've got you. You can't outrun that, right? But if every one of you looks like a threat, then they have to play 1-on-1. And it's perfect. That's what you want. So these 3 girls, I think you know, took it to heart. They are a legit scoring threat every time they have the ball. And that's Gloria, Alexia, and Mel. Congratulations.